The stars above Veridon 6 flickered with dying light, their cold glow casting long shadows over a shattered world crying for help. For months, the planet had been under siege by a brutal alien faction known as the Krell Dominion. Cities had fallen, families had vanished, planetary government had crumbled like dust, and the few survivors left behind clung to hope like broken glass sharp. Painful, but all they had. Inside a hidden underground bunker, a desperate signal was sent out, an ancient wideband distress call encoded in over 600 galactic languages, broadcast into deep space. It wasn't targeted, it wasn't formal, it was a scream. The Veridon technicians knew the Council wouldn't come. Council never came for forgotten planets. They only came for profit or politics. And the signal, once sent, echoed into the silence of space like a whisper in a tomb. No one expected a reply, certainly not from Earth, a world once labeled as too dangerous to contact. Locked away behind old treaties, its people feared, its warriors exiled by choice, not force. But something heard that scream. Something that did not wear robes or medals. Something that didn't waste time with long debates or diplomatic chains. Across the galaxy, in a dark command station, orbiting a cold, dead moon, a forgotten Earth listening post blinked to life for the first time in decades. The signal reached Itro weak, full of pain. Earth's AI core analyzed it. No politics, no permissions, just one line of evaluation. Civilians in extreme danger. Request. Immediate action. Soft synthetic voice responded to no one in particular, deploying Deathworlder protocol. That was it. No vote, no warning, no press conference. Only movement. Silent, fast, final. Somewhere above the edge of the solar system, ships that hadn't launched in 100 years began to hum. Black armor was pulled from cryovaults. Sleeper units awoke. Deathworlders, humans bred from the most hostile planet ever recorded, were being deployed once. Again, Veridon survivors huddled in silence as the Krell warships moved in for the kill. They had broken through the last defense grid. Fires rained from the sky. Mother held her child tight, whispering stories of the stars, trying to distract the boy from the sound of orbital weapons warming up. On the final hill outside the ruins of the capital city, the Krell warlord gave the signal. End him, he growled. No one noticed the small pulse of black energy that blinked in the clouds. No one paid attention to the strange silence that followed until it was too late. With no warning, the sky cracked open like glass. 10 ships appeared black as night, shaped like blades, moving like shadows. No names, no banners, just power. The Krell looked up, confused. Council reinforcements? One asked. But then the first Deathworlder ship opened fire, precision rail cannons slicing through Krell destroyers without missing. One shot, one kill. No words, no delay, just execution. The Deathworlders didn't speak. They didn't negotiate. Landed hard, fast, unannounced. On the battlefield, black-armored humans stepped out, tall and silent, faces hidden behind silver visors. They didn't shout orders. They didn't talk at all. They just moved. A squad of Krell fighters charged. To ward them on, were gone in seconds. The humans didn't just fight. They erased, cleanly, without emotion. Without hesitation, one survivor, a teenage girl, peeked from the rubble as a Deathworlder passed by. His armor was burned. His rifle glowed red-hot. She reached out. "Are you here to save us?" she whispered. The soldier didn't reply, but he turned for just a second, his visor reflecting the burning sky, and handed her a small black cube. On it was a blinking circle, cracked in half. Earth's mark. No words, no promises, but she understood. They had come, and no one could stop them now. In the Council's high-orbit station far across the galaxy, alarms flared. Unauthorized. Earth deployment detected in Sector 74G. Politicians looked at each other in horror. They answered a civilian distress signal. "That's a direct violation of Galactic Code 993. Another replied, "But they saved Veridon." We didn't even respond. Cold silence followed. They had been too slow, too weak. and now Earth had done what no one else would. The fear returned in. Old, buried fear. The Deathworlders were back. They weren't asking permission. In just 1 hour, the Krell forces were destroyed, not driven off, not pushed back. Erased, Veridon's survivors emerged from bunkers, blinking in the light of a sky no longer filled with fire. But Earth's ships didn't stay. They didn't wait for applause or thanks. They left as fast as they came, leaving behind only supplies, medkits, clean water, and a single drone standing in the ruins. It played one message on repeat. "We heard your call," Earth responds. "If danger returns, we will too." Words spread across the stars like wildfire. Other dying colonies tried to send their own signals. Smugglers whispered of black ships appearing where no hope remained. Pirates began retreating from zones marked with Earth's broken circle symbol. Council forces started censoring any mention of Deathworlders in the media, but the people already knew. Earth was no longer just a myth. It was real. It was watching. It didn't wait for orders. In the dark edges of the galaxy, where no one else would go, the Deathworlders moved. Not for conquest, not for power, but for something far more dangerous. Justice and the galaxy would never be the same again. The ashes of war still hung in the air over Veridon 6, painting the sky in pale gray as the winds carried the last screams of the defeated Krell across the ruined cities. Survivors crawled from tunnels and shelters, blinking in disbelief at a sky no longer filled with flames. But what haunted them now wasn't the silence, it was the ship still hovering quietly above them. 10 black leviathans, unmoving and monstrous, with holes built for punishment and destruction, yet holding their fire. The people had never seen anything like them. No markings, no flags, no windows. Just pure dark metal and energy thrumming like a distant heartbeat. The Deathworlders had answered the call, and now they stood on their soil. Word spread quickly. The humans hadn't left. They were still here, watching, waiting. A new fear crept into the survivors' minds, not of the Krell, but of what came next. Were these warriors protectors, or something far more dangerous? That question remained unanswered, as drop pods rained down like falling meteors, slamming into the ground with earth-shaking force. They hissed open slowly, and from the black metal shells stepped the soldiers of Earth. They moved without sound. No war cries, no introductions. Its motions swift, practiced, cold. They walked like ghosts in armor, their faces hidden behind reflective visors, weapons at the ready, bodies built for war. Each soldier carried not just firepower, but a presence that made even the bravest alien warriors flinch. The people of Veridon didn't know whether to cheer or run. They simply stood frozen, staring at legends made real, one by one. The Deathworlders spread out across the ruins, not searching for enemies, but evaluating threats. Buildings still burning were scanned and mapped. Radiation zones were flagged. Injured civilians were approached and treated, but never with words, only silent gestures. Medical pods opened with soft blue light, accepting the wounded and sealing them inside. Nanobots cleaned wounds. Drones hovered overhead, scanning every corner of the ruined city, like they were preparing for something more.
What unsettled the
locals most was the lack of expression. No celebration, no sadness, just focus, pure mission. A small group of survivors approached one of the black-armored humans. The leader, a thin, older alien named Rethan, lifted his arms in surrender. "Are you peacekeepers?" he asked with trembling voice. The Deathworlder didn't answer. Instead, he turned and pointed upward. There, hanging in the sky, a projection flickered to life. A message played in hundreds of galactic languages. One sentence repeated again and again. "We do not speak for politics. We act for survival." Then the soldier turned and walked away, leaving Rethon to wonder if salvation had come, or judgment. Meanwhile, in orbit, inside one of the Deathworlder, command ships named Voidlands. Commander Vale stood in front of a holodisplay showing every street, every tunnel, every heat signature in the city below. Her armor was darker than space itself, and her voice when she spoke was quiet but carried weight. "We are not here to be thanked," she said to her team. "We are here because no one else came." Her officers nodded. Behind them, A's processed distress signals from 6 other colonies. Veridon was just the first, the beginning. The galaxy was broken, and Earth had stopped waiting for permission to fix it. Vale tapped a command into her console. A squad of stealth drones activated and launched toward the outer forests, hunting for the last pockets of Krell who might have survived. "No witnesses," she whispered. "No warnings. We finish what we start. Down below, strange things were happening. Krell bodies were being burned, not in anger, but in cleansing. The Deathworlders collected no trophies, took no prisoners. They simply cleaned the battlefield like a surgeon finishing surgery. People watched them in awe. Even the youngest survivors could feel it. These weren't soldiers. These were weapons. In human shape, and yet they brought food, delivered medicine. They didn't look for cameras or thanks. A child watched as a black-armored soldier kneeled beside a dying animal and gave it water. A moment later, he stood and walked away. No words, no gesture, just an action. And something deep in the hearts of the people began to shift. Fear was still there, but it began to mix with respect. Hours passed and the cleanup operation continued. No Krell were left, not one. Survivors gathered in the town square, watching as Earth's soldiers constructed a silent structure in the middle of the rubble. It wasn't a building, it wasn't a fortress. It was a beacon tall, black and humming with quiet energy. Number 1 knew what it did, but somehow they all felt safer once it powered up. A message scrolled across its surface in glowing red lines. "This planet has been answered. You are under Deathworlder watch. Threats will not return. No dates, no names, just a promise. Out." And in a galaxy filled with broken words and hollow treaties, that promise felt heavier than anything else. Across space, the Council panicked. "They've landed troops," a voice cried during an emergency meeting. "This isn't a rescue. This is military occupation," another diplomat shouted. "We need to respond before the people start calling them liberators." But even as they argued, more signals came in. From other colonies, from other broken worlds, all repeating the same thing. Earth came. Earth helped. Earth stayed. The Council tried to send fleets, but their ships were too slow, their laws too complicated. By the time their orders arrived, the Deathworlders had already moved on to the next call. The next burning world, the next cry for help in the dark, on Veridon 6. The people began to paint the broken circle symbol on their walls, not out of fear but out of hope. They didn't know Earth's history. They didn't understand Deathworlder training or Earth's dark past. They only knew one thing. When they called out, someone actually came, and that someone didn't ask for anything in return. The Deathworlders didn't claim land, didn't take power. They simply restored what was broken and vanished. But before they left, Commander Vale stood alone in the highest ruin of Veridon's. Capita. She looked out at the horizon, her visor reflecting the stars. "One spark is enough," she whispered. "Now let's burn the darkness down." And with that, the black ships rose into the sky again. No applause, no parades, just silence. And justice. Far beyond Veridon 6, in the cold black lanes of deep space, a trap had been set. The Krell Dominion, still furious from their defeat, had joined with 2 other warlords' factions, the Skorothi Bloodsworn and the fractured remains of the Togan clans. Together they prepared a strike, not to reclaim Veridon, but to make a statement that Earth was not untouchable. They studied the Deathworlder ship patterns, calculated the routes, and deployed an ambush fleet into the Krell Star Corridor. Narrow stretch of uncharted space, often used by Earth's fast-response supply craft. The enemy fleet waited in silence. 32 warships, hundreds of fighters, traps embedded in asteroid fields, cloaking fields active. The plan was simple: isolate, surround, destroy, and broadcast the wreckage across the galaxy. Make Earth fear what the galaxy had always feared: numbers and brutality. But they made one critical mistake. They thought Deathworlders followed the same rules as everyone else. What came next would be recorded by nearby sensor drones and passed between smugglers, outlaws, and frightened military leaders for years. It would be shown in shadowy bars, spoken about in whispers, and feared more than any law the Council had ever passed. Because Earth didn't respond with fear, it responded with precision. And they showed the galaxy what no mercy truly meant. It began when the enemy fleet's cloaked sensors. It picked up 2 Earth supply ships entering the corridor slow, unarmed, carrying food, medicine, and civilian equipment for a planet Earth had just helped rebuild. The warlords waited until both ships reached the narrowest part of the corridor, then struck. Asteroids exploded around them. Energy blasts lit the void. Fighters poured from hidden bays like angry wasps. The supply. Ships were hit, damaged but not destroyed. The warlords closed in, confident. That confidence died seconds later. From nowhere, 20 Deathworlder ships appeared, dropping from warp in complete silence. No comes, no light shows. Just arrival. The warlords screamed orders. Form a wall. Hit them first. But the Deathworlders didn't wait. They didn't speak. They simply acted. Their weapons tore through shields like cloth. One shot, one kill. They didn't chase. They didn't celebrate. Deleted. Within the first minute, 7 enemy warships were gone, atomized so fast that their explosions hadn't finished before the next ones lit up. The Deathworlder ships moved in perfect formations, like a machine with many arms, striking with mathematical accuracy and terrifying calm. Enemy fighters tried to flank them. Earth's automated drones were already behind them, cutting wings, disabling engines, sending pilots spinning into blackness. One of the warlord leaders, General Croc of the Skorathi, opened a cum channel. In desperation, "We surrender." "Repeat, we surrender," shouted. Silence. Then a single Earth drone transmitted a reply. "You did not show mercy at Veridon. We returned the lesson." And then his ship vanished in a beam of pale blue light. Not even wreckage remained. The other commanders panicked. Some tried to retreat. Others overloaded their own reactors, hoping to take Deathworlder ships with them. But Earth's vessels adapted. Shields adjusted. Flight paths changed in milliseconds. One by one, every enemy ship was removed. Not just beaten, erased from the field. The final ship, a heavy command cruiser, tried to ram a Deathworlder vessel. But before it could even make contact, it stopped its systems dead, its hull frozen. Solid. Earth's AI weapons had shut it down like a toy. Inside, the crew froze in fear as Earth's boarding party arrived. No weapons drawn, no words, just black armor and silent steps. They placed a device in the center of the bridge. When it activated, the ship's systems turned back on, except now. It played a single message over and over on all channels. Earth responds. Earth protects. Earth punishes. In the outer colonies, people watching the recovered footage of the battle couldn't believe what they saw. These weren't warriors. They were instruments of war. Efficient.com, absolute. The Council's military leaders shuddered as they watched ships twice Earth's size torn apart in seconds. "They don't fight like us," one whispered. "They don't even think like us." Panic spread through warlord-controlled sectors. Some factions disbanded completely, abandoning strongholds without a fight. Others tried to beg for peace, sending desperate transmissions to Earth. But Earth didn't reply. They didn't negotiate with those who hurt civilians. The message was clear. You hurt the innocent, we find you. There would be no second chances. Back. Aboard the Deathworlder flagship Voidlance, Commander Vale stood in the dim war room, surrounded by holograms showing enemy fleet routes, pirate movements, and civilian distress points. "They ambushed supply ships," one officer reported, same as always. "Cowards attacking the weak." Vale didn't respond right away. She stared at the map, then spoke slowly. "They made a mistake. They thought kindness meant weakness. But we remember what silence costs." Around her, soldiers and AI units prepared for the next operation. No one spoke of victory. They had done what was necessary, what no one else would. And now, across the galaxy, those who lived by fear had a new name for it. Deathworld or justice. On a drifting smuggler station, a broadcast played the battle in a loop. An old alien bartender wiped his glass and said, "You see that? That's not a war fleet. That's what happens when you kick a sleeping storm." The others nodded, quiet. And somewhere far away, in a dark place where no help had ever come before, a weak voice whispered into a communicator, "If anyone can hear me, please, send the Deathworlders." And someone did. The planet Morales 9 hadn't seen a supply ship in 5 years. Once a thriving farming world in the outer belt, it was now dry, cracked, silent, abandoned by the Galactic Council after the last trade lanes collapsed. No defenses and no hope. When the warlords came, they took what they wanted: food, children, bodies, and left behind nothing but broken homes and graves. The council marked it as low priority and then simply forgot it. But someone remembered. A child named Ilari, barely 12 years old, had watched her parents taken by raiders and her village burned to ash. She'd escaped into the mountains and survived by listening to old broadcasts through a broken radio. That's where she heard it, fragments of whispers from other planets, messages that spoke of silent ships, black armor, and humans who answered cries for help. The Deathworlders, Ilari, didn't know if it was real. No one believed her when she spoke of Earth. "They're myths," the elders said. "Dangerous ghosts. Earth was sealed off long ago." But Ilari believed. One night, under a broken sky, filled with lightning, she climbed the tallest hill and turned her cracked transmitter to the stars. She didn't speak fancy codes. She didn't even know the right frequency. She just cried, "Please, someone help us. You're still alive. Please don't forget us." The message wasn't strong. It barely traveled. But it didn't need to be perfect. It just needed to reach one place. Somewhere deep inside an old Earth listening post, the signal was caught. Faint, shaky, but real. It activated a Deathworlder AI relay that flagged the location as Category 0, civilian distress. And within minutes, Earth's silent answer began to move. 3 days later, black ships appeared over Morales 9. No announcements, no questions, just shadows that moved with purpose. The people ran at first, afraid they were being raided again. But when the first dropships landed and opened, they saw no slavers, only tall humans in armor, scanning for threats and unloading crates of supplies. Food, medicine, tools, drones flew overhead, mapping the land. Within hours, clean water flowed again. Villages were powered. Roads were cleared. No one understood why they were being helped, especially when Earth had nothing to gain. It's a woman named Shy, one of the village leaders, approached a Deathworlder soldier and asked the question every survivor wanted to scream: "Why us? We have nothing. We are no one. Why did you come?" The soldier didn't speak. But a hologram blinked beside him, playing a single sentence over and over in dozens of languages. "No one is forgotten, not while Earth listens." Shy fell too, her knees in tears. It wasn't a rescue, it was a miracle. Word spread across Morales fast. For the first time in years, children laughed. People came out from hiding. The Deathworlders didn't take anything. They didn't demand loyalty. They didn't raise flags or build bases. They simply helped hand protected. A fleet of warlord scavenger ships tried to sneak into orbit days later. They never made it past the outer atmosphere. Earth's drones locked on, engaged silently, and erased them from the sky in under 30 seconds. No wreckage fell, just ash, and silence, and after that, the stars above Morales remained peaceful. But the people noticed something else. To Earth didn't just bring relief. They brought unity. They left behind plans, blueprints, simple defensive systems and codebooks, so the people could protect themselves next time. They trained volunteers, taught them to read satellite data, gave them silent power, not control, but responsibility. A young boy asked a soldier, "Will Earth stay forever?" The soldier finally spoke, his voice deep, calm, and direct. "No," he said, "because we don't want you to need us forever. You must become what others need next." It was a strange lesson, but it stayed. When the black ships lifted off again, and disappeared. They left behind no monuments, just working cities, guarded skies, and a people who now believed in something new. A people who would no longer wait to be saved, but would rise to save others. Morales was no longer forgotten. It had become a start, a new beginning. A reminder to the galaxy that Earth didn't come to conquer. It came to light fires. One world at a time. In the council chambers far away, panic was rising. Morales was dead. One member shouted. It wasn't even on the support list. Now it's sending out messages of alliance with Earth. Another added. They're spreading like wildfire without taking territory, but there was nothing they could do. The council's orders moved slowly, their ships were slower, and their words for too long had meant nothing. The Deathworlders, however, didn't wait. They didn't ask. They simply acted. And now the people were watching Earth, not the council. On dozens of other struggling worlds, weak transmitters were switched back on. Survivors, once silenced by fear, began whispering into space again, not begging for aid, asking one question, "Are you listening?" And somewhere, Earth's reply moved in the dark quiet, direct and full of fury. Because the Deathworlders had remembered the forgotten and they were just getting started. The fire had faded, but the fear was only growing. Across the galaxy, leaders who once ruled with terror now slept with one eye open. Pirates, warlords, and corrupt council governors spoke less in threats and more in whispers, because Earth's Deathworlders were no longer just a rumor. They were real, they were active, and they had no interest in talking. Entire empires built on silence and fear were beginning to crack, not because of war, but because the people were no longer afraid to call out. On the jungle moon of Thalprim, a pirate stronghold that had gone untouched for years found its central fortress burned to the ground overnight without a single gunshot reported. Surveillance drones found only one thing left behind: a single black coin with Earth's broken circle symbol carved into it, left in the center of the command table. On Velik Station, an illegal slave market was found empty, not destroyed, empty. No blood, no wreckage, just gone. The slaves freed, the slavers missing. When questioned, the station administrator could only shake his head and say, "They moved like shadows. We didn't even hear footsteps." In every dark corner of the galaxy, it was the same: no negotiations, no demands, just silent justice. But it wasn't just fear of death that spread, it was fear of change. Council officials noticed something strange happening on world's Earth had saved. Those planets stopped asking for council aid. They stopped paying tribute. They started working together, sharing tech, sending each other food, building things the council had long claimed were impossible. And worst of all, they started spreading Earth's symbol like a flame. Painted on walls, drawn into the dirt, carved into stone. It didn't mean war. It meant hope. It meant someone was watching. It meant you were not alone anymore. The council couldn't control it because it wasn't a government tit. It was a belief. A belief that Earth would come for anyone who cried out. That the Deathworlders didn't care who you were or what planet you came from. If you were innocent and in danger, they would find you. And that terrified the ones who held power for so long. In one Deep Space Council meeting, a high-ranking admiral stood up and said, "Earth is not the enemy. They do what we failed to do for years. We sit in this room while people suffer. They move." His voice echoed through the chamber, but others only stared at him with cold eyes. One whispered, "You admire them too much." The admiral didn't answer. He only turned and walked out, knowing his days in the council were now numbered. Outside that same station, in the shadow of the council's symbol, someone had painted over it with the Earth mark overnight aired. No one dared erase it. Meanwhile, inside one of Earth's Deathworlder ships, Commander Vale sat in a dark command room as footage played from liberated planets. She watched a child hand-drawing the Earth symbol on a broken wall. A woman planting crops in soil once soaked in blood. A village repairing a generator left by Earth's supply drones. Vale didn't smile. She didn't need to. She only said, "The fire is lit. Now we move faster." Her officers nodded. The plan had never been conquest. It had been ignition. Show the galaxy what real protection looked like. And let the people choose no force, no treaties, just results. Let the corrupt grow afraid. Let the people grow brave. But fear works both ways. In the dark systems beyond Council reach, several warlords formed a new alliance, the Cold Ring Pact. Angry, powerful, and now afraid, they decided to make Earth bleed. They launched simultaneous attacks on 3 Earth-supported colonies. On the frozen world of Nostra 4, raiders attacked the rebuilt farms. On the mining moon Orin Delta, they cut power and communications, hoping to make the colonists feel alone again. And on Grelith Station, they kidnapped dozens of workers in hopes of baiting Earth into making a mistake. But Earth didn't make mistakes. Earth watched. When the attacks began, Deathworlder fleets were already in motion. They arrived before any of the enemy ships even left orbit. They didn't respond to threats. They didn't open talks. They acted on Nostro 4. The raiders found their own ships already sabotaged. Deathworlder saboteurs had landed hours earlier and dismantled their engines from the inside. The enemy froze to death on a planet they thought they would conquer. On Orin Delta, Earth's stealth drones reactivated the power grid before the invaders even landed, catching them in the open with nowhere to hide. Precision orbital strikes left only silence. And on Grelith Station, Earth didn't rescue the hostages. The hostages rescued themselves, using Deathworlder training and gear secretly delivered weeks before. The message was clear. Earth doesn't show up late. Earth prepares. After these events, a quiet fear turned into open panic. Warlords began turning on each other. Some tried to make backdoor deals with Earth's offering bribes or shared intelligence. Earth didn't reply. Instead, in every corner of the void, Earth's presence grew without force. Drones watched space lanes. Relief teams dropped onto new worlds. Deathworlders continued deploying, not as rulers, as guardians. But always with the same message: you brought fire to the innocent. We bring what follows. In a bar on a neutral station near the edge of known space, an old ex-mercenary watched a silent news stream on the wall. He shook his head slowly and muttered to a young pilot beside him, "We used to think Earth was a myth. I think they're the last bit of sanity left in this cursed galaxy." The pilot asked, "You ever seen one of them?" The mercenary sipped his drink. "Yeah, once. Didn't see their face. But I saw what they left behind. A city that should have burned, still standing. And the monsters that tried to destroy it, gone, not killed, removed, like they were never there." And so, the fear that followed fire continued to spread. Not the fear of destruction, not even the fear of death, but the fear of being watched by something that cannot be bribed, cannot be reasoned with, and will not stop once it has seen injustice. The Deathworlders had arrived like ghosts. But now they were everywhere. Their message had become a promise. You hurt the helpless, if you prey on the weak, if you bring fire, Earth will answer. There was something more terrifying than noise, more powerful than weapons, more unshakable than any wall, and that was silence. The Deathworlders didn't speak. They didn't post messages. They didn't issue grand declarations or share victory. Logs, where others bragged, Earth watched. Where others shouted, Earth listened. And where others made threats, Earth moved, then moved without warning. That silence wasn't a weakness. It was a shield, a weapon, a warning. The galaxy had grown used to political speeches, long debates, and endless promises that led nowhere. So when Earth arrived in total silence, acted without explaining, and left without applause, it disturbed something deep inside every corrupt heart and power. They couldn't read Earth's intentions, couldn't track their motives, couldn't predict their next move. And that made the Deathworlders the most dangerous force the galaxy had ever known, not because they wanted to rule, but because they didn't need to. They only needed to exist, and their existence alone was enough to send warlords into hiding and tyrants into panic. Their silence was judgment in pure form, no speeches, no chances, no second warnings. And yet, to the innocent, that silence was something else, was safety. It was a quiet promise. You don't need to be loud to be heard. Somewhere in the star system of Draxel Reach, A council-eyed governor was preparing to sell out his own people to a pirate clan. The deal was simple: hand over a group of mining colonies, take the bribe, and let the pirates enslave whoever was left. He thought no one knew. He thought the meeting was secret. He thought Earth didn't care about the smaller systems. But when the pirate ship entered orbit, it was already being followed. The Deathworlders didn't interrupt the deal. They didn't send a warning. They let it happen. And then they made sure neither the pirate ship nor the corrupt governor ever made it home. No one knew exactly how it happened. All systems failed at once. The pirate ship vanished from sensors. The governor's palace, located on the surface of Draxel Prime, collapsed inward in what appeared to be a total gravitational anomaly, a rare event that somehow happened at the exact moment the deal was made. No explosions, no sounds, just silence, then absence. Investigators sent by the council arrived late, as always, and found no trace. But someone had left a drone behind. It played a single line of text, glowing on a repeating loop. Earth listens. Earth remembers. Earth corrects. No one claimed responsibility. Earth never spoke of it. But across the stars, the message was received. At the same time, new colonies that once begged for help were now preparing themselves, using Deathworlder tech and training left behind. On the planet Rose 7, children were being taught how to signal Earth with old radio bands. Farmers were repairing their own defense grids. The people had started saying something new when they looked up at the night sky. Not "please help us," but "we're ready now." It wasn't worship. It wasn't fear. It was something rare. Trust. Quiet. Deep trust in something that didn't ask for payment or demand allegiance. Something that acted when no one else would. The Deathworlders had become more than myth. They had become a silent standard, something to live up to. And Earth, still unseen, kept moving one mission at a time, without praise, without spotlight. Inside a Deathworlder warship traveling through the silent lanes of Sector 84B, Commander Vale stood in the command chamber, surrounded by soft blue light and floating data displays. Her face was as unreadable as always, her armor showing the marks of 5 operations in the last week alone. "How many signals this cycle?" she asked calmly. Synthetic voice replied, 73. 11 are false. 4 are traps. "Are real?" Vale nodded once. "Sort by urgency. Send scout teams. No delays." She didn't ask who the people were. She didn't care about their species, their politics, or their history. If they were in danger, they were protected. If they were hunters of the innocent, they were erased. Simple, efficient, unbreakable. That was Earth's code. And no council law or galactic treaty would stop it. But there were those who still tried. The Krell Dominion, weakened and afraid, formed an alliance with old enemies to build a defense fleet meant to intercept Earth's ships. They believed they could bait them, corner them, perhaps finally catch one alive and understand how Deathworlders worked. They sent a false SOS from a civilian freighter drifting near the Tar-Size Gappa, known pirate trap zone. Arrived silently. As expected, the trap was sprung. 50 hostile ships appeared. Energy nets were deployed. Interceptors closed in, but Earth didn't run. Earth didn't flinch. Earth deployed protocol Black Silence, counter-strategy designed not to fight back, but to turn every attacking ship against itself. Hack codes entered through open channels. Internal systems shut down. Power rerouted. Within 3 minutes, the enemy ships were floating dead in space. Not destroyed, disabled. And each one began broadcasting one line of Earth's making. "We attack the innocent," Earth answered. The council scrambled to spin the story, but it was too late. All 60 enemy captains were captured by their own crews, shamed and afraid of what Earth might do next. And that was the true power of the Deathworlders. Not just weapons, not just silence, but the ability to make their enemies turn on themselves. The galaxy was changing. Not because Earth forced it to, but because everyone else had forgotten how to act without fear, and Earth reminded them what fear really was. The Deathworlders didn't fight for power. They fought to balance the scales. And they did so with a quiet fire that never went out. In a dark bar on the edge of the galaxy, An old freighter captain shared a drink with a young refugee. She asked, "Do you think Earth is watching us now?" The captain looked up at the ceiling, where the stars couldn't be seen, and said softly, "If they are, we'll never know it. And that's what makes them dangerous. They don't need thanks. They just need a reason." And somewhere far above, a single Deathworlder ship drifted past a quiet moon. No words, no lights, just motion, watching, listening, and waiting. There comes a moment in every war where silence is no longer enough, where the weight of warnings turns into something permanent. The galaxy had watched, had listened, had feared, but still, some believed Earth would stop, that the Deathworlders would grow tired or lose interest, or finally break under pressure. But the truth was far darker. Earth never stopped because Earth never forgot. Every child enslaved, every village burned, every unanswered call that wasn't just a tragedy. It was recorded, marked, stored, studied, and one by one. Each of those crimes became coordinates, targets, justice. On the shattered moon world of Carthuswelve, an old war criminal named Brolic had lived untouched for over 20 years, protected by council bureaucracy and hidden behind old treaties. His crimes were legendary. He had turned peaceful cities into ashes and sold prisoners into darkness. He thought Earth wouldn't come for him. He thought history had buried the past. But one morning, as the sun rose weakly over the cracked horizon, Brolic's fortress simply vanished, not exploded, not invaded, erased. A crater remained still hot, and at its center, a single iron spike stood tall with Earth's broken circle symbol glowing red-hot. Underneath, written in simple burning letters, were the words, "This is the line. Cross it and vanish." The galaxy shook.
Not because a tyrant was gone,
but because the message was too clear to ignore. Earth had drawn a line. And that line was not based on politics, power, or profit. It was based on blood. Anyone who spilled the blood of the innocent was now marked. No trial, no debate, just consequence. That line wasn't written in ink or laws, it was written in the remains. Of those who crossed it, the galaxy finally realized that Earth didn't want war. They wanted order. It's true, cold, unshakable order. Not the kind politicians spoke of, but the kind forged in pain, memory, and fire. The kind that came when enough was truly enough. On 50 different worlds, those who had once ruled through terror fled into hiding. Some tried to erase records of their crimes. Others paid smugglers to move them to the edges of known space. But the Deathworlders were already watching. And now they were not just responding to cries for help, they were answering the screams of the forgotten dot in the deep. Command deck of Earth's hidden fleet. Headquarters in asteroid fortress known only as Echo Point. Commander Vale stood in silence, watching as red marks disappeared from the galaxy map. Not because they were safe, but because the targets were gone. 5 more systems cleared, an officer reported. Vale didn't speak. She just stared at one flashing Telion Verge, a colony where an entire population had been erased by slavers who sold their location to warlords in exchange for favors. Earth had arrived too late to save them. But now, they would arrive. In time for justice, Vale tapped her armored finger against the console and said for simple words, "Deploy. No second chances." The Deathworlders didn't come in force, just 3 ships, but that was enough. When they appeared over Elion Verge, the slaver fleet didn't even try to fight. They begged. They offered credits. They claimed they had changed. But Earth had already passed judgment. The slaver ships were taken offline within 90 seconds. Their leaders were captured, scanned, and marked. And then they were sent not to prisons, but to the same freezing surface where the Elion colonists had died. No shelter, no food, no exit. The message was brutal, but fair. You live as they did, die as they did. Some across the galaxy began to call Earth monsters. Others called them angels. But the truth was harder to define. Earth was not here to be loved or feared. Earth was here to remember and to make sure the universe did too. On liberated worlds, small children began drawing the broken circle in school books, not as a symbol of war, but as a symbol of protection. Villages once afraid to speak were now training to defend themselves, not because Earth demanded it, but because Earth had shown what standing meant. It wasn't about fighting. It was about never kneeling again. The Deathworlders didn't ask to be followed, but their silence had become a path others now chose to walk. The path was made with fire. Back at Council headquarters, the leaders had lost control of the narrative. Every effort to paint Earth as dangerous only made them more respected. Every attempt to restrict their movements only exposed how slow and weak the Council had become. The people no longer believed their speeches. They believed the survivors. The ones who said, Earth came, Earth helped, Earth vanished, and that truth couldn't be silenced. Not anymore. Even Council soldiers started asking, why don't we do what Earth does? The seeds of change were growing. But Earth didn't wait for permission to lead. It just moved, quietly, without parades, without praise. And now, the galaxy followed their footsteps in fear and in hope. On a small moon station, near the void's edge, a group of scavengers found a message etched into a wall with perfect precision. It had no sender, no signature, just a line that read, if you take from the weak, Earth will find you. If you strike first, Earth will end it. This is not revenge, this is correction. And beneath it, the symbol again, half broken, half whole. The galaxy understood. The Deathworlders weren't heroes or villains. They were the answer to a question the universe had ignored for too long. What happens when the forgotten are remembered? The answer was now written everywhere. Not in history books, not in laws, but in fear, in courage, and in blood. The galaxy had changed. Not with speeches, not with votes, but with silence that struck harder than any fleet. Where once tyrants spoke loudly, now they whispered in fear. Where once the weak hid, now they stood straighter. Earth had not asked for control, it had not taken territory or demanded loyalty. But it had done something no other force had done in 1,000 years. It had listened, and more importantly, it had answered. In the shadows of a broken galaxy, that answer had echoed, like a warning bell. The Deathworlders had become more than a name. They were a presence, a promise, a line of protection, drawn not around nations or empires, but around those who had no one else. That was the mission. That was the reason. And it had all begun with a single, desperate signal from a world the galaxy had forgotten. Now that signal had reached farther than anyone ever expected. Not just to Earth, but across stars, systems, species. It had become a spark. The dark was no longer safe. In the black sector known only as the Hollow, a final plan had been set into motion. The last broken alliance of warlords, exiles, and corrupted council elites had gathered there, believing they could hide in deep space and regroup. They thought Earth wouldn't find them. But Earth didn't need light to see. The Deathworlder scouts had been watching the Hollow for months, mapping its entry points, tracing hidden supply lines, tracking the whispers. Commander Vale stood at the edge of her war table aboard the Vigilance, staring into a 3D model of the sector. Red dots flickered, each one representing ships that had enslaved, stolen, or silenced the helpless. She spoke only once. Begin the answer. With those 3 words, Earth's judgment moved forward, not to conquer. To end, Earth's fleet didn't arrive in force. They arrived in silenced 20 ships, each equipped for precision. The strategy was not destruction, but correction. Inside the Hollow, enemy ships started to vanish one by one. No explosions, no battles, just gone. Life support cut. Engines dead. Communications blocked. Entire fleets became ghosts, their crews trapped in silence they once used to oppress others. In less than 12 hours, the entire alliance broke apart. Some tried to flee. Earth let them. But before they jumped to warp, a single sentence was broadcast into their minds, translated perfectly into every native tongue. You heard the call for help. You chose to ignore it. Earth did not. This is the cost. One by one, the cowards surrendered, not out of honor, but because the dark was no longer theirs, in a sealed chamber on a council space station. The last of the corrupt elite gathered around a table, desperate for answers. "They won't stop," one said. "We have to speak to them," another added. "We have to understand what they want." But the truth was already known. Earth wanted nothing. Earth expected nothing. That was what made them unstoppable. They didn't seek power. They served purpose. A councilman slammed his fist against the table. "We created these monsters by forgetting the people, by forgetting pain," now they remind us. No one spoke again. There was nothing left to say. Back on the surface of Morales 9, the world, where Earth first answered the signal, a young girl stood atop the same mountain where she once begged for help. Her name was Alari. She was no longer afraid. Her people had rebuilt. She had grown. And now, as new settlers arrived to join them, she taught the children what hope looked like. Not in speeches, not in dreams, but in action, in silence, courage. "Will the Deathworlders come back?" Alari smiled softly. "They never left. You just don't always see them." At that same moment, high above the clouds, a small black drone passed silently, watching, protecting, never interfering. And then it faded back into orbit. In the outer systems, they still whispered stories of Earth. They called them many names. The quiet storm, the Watchers, the final line. But Earth didn't care for names. Earth only cared for the truth. And the truth was now clear. When the galaxy had stopped listening, Earth had heard the cries. When the galaxy had stopped caring, Earth had remembered. And when all others stood down, Earth stood up. Not for pride, not for power, but because someone had to. Someone always has to. In the command deck of the flagship, Commander Vale looked out at the stars. Her ship was quiet. Her crew was calm. Another mission ended. Another wrong made right. A voice came through her comes. Another signal received. Faint. Outer fringe. She nodded once. "Prepare the jump. Let's remind them that no one is alone." And with that, the stars stretched, the ship vanished into black. Earth's shadow moved once more. The galaxy was still broken, still dangerous, still full of those who would harm and steal and destroy. But now, the helpless were no longer unheard. Because out there, somewhere, just beyond the darkness, a force waited. Silent, sharp, unstoppable. And when the next cry came, when the next light begged for help, it would be answered. Not by kings, not by fleets.
But
To men by with the weather with the upper one my vapor. That would be enough.